There have been 96 winners of the Oscar for Best Picture. Some of these were widely agreed to be the best film of the year. However, there have been many where that wasn't the case. Why did these movies win? Is there a certain formula for success? I think there is, and with the 97th Academy Awards just around the corner, I'm going to use this formula to predict the winner of this year's Best Picture. To explain, let's go back to 2018 and talk about one of those controversial winners. Green Book, a film about the unlikely friendship between this guy and this guy. When I watched it, I remember thinking it was a pretty good movie, but nothing exceptional. However, the Oscars disagreed with me, as it won 3 Oscars, including the 2019 Best Picture Award, beating fellow nominees such as The Favourite, well, evidently not for the Academy, Roma, and Vice. Hell, my favourite movie of the year, Mission Impossible Fallout, which was critically acclaimed, wasn't even nominated. But who are we kidding? It was never going to be. You see, certain kinds of movies tend to attract the Oscars. Oscar bait. This term refers to movies that seem deliberately crafted to appeal to the preferences of Academy Award voters. And I would argue, Green Book is one of those movies. Why? Well, it ticks some key boxes. It's a historical drama, based on a true story, exploring topical social themes, the main one being prejudice, and led by 2 Oscar-nominated actors. But am I onto something here? Is Green Book really Oscar bait? Or am I just bitter about Mission Impossible getting snubbed? To find out, I crunched the numbers and built a model. My goal? To uncover the preferences of the Academy, using those insights to predict this year's winner of Best Picture. So let's take a look at the methodology of my model. The model takes into account the following factors that I believe are key to quantifying how Oscar-friendly, or baity, a movie is. Genre. Keywords. These could be topics, settings, characters, structural elements, etc. Month of release. Movies released in award season tend to be fresh in voters' minds. Cast and crew. How Oscar-friendly are the lead actors, as well as the director? Runtime. And lastly, budget, adjusted for inflation of course. For each factor, an Oscar baity score is calculated, ranging from 0 to 1. For example, a genre score of 1 means the movie's genre is very Oscar baity, and a budget score of 0 means the movie's budget is very un-Oscar baity. Each factor is also weighted, signifying its importance in the model. For example, in determining how Oscar baity each movie is, genre and keywords are the most important factors, making up 25% of the Oscar baity score each, followed by month of release and cast and crew, and lastly, runtime and budget. The movie's Oscar baity score, MOBS for short, is then calculated using a weighted average. The model is implemented in 2 steps. Initializing the model, basically determining what, for example, an Oscar baity genre is and is not, i.e. which genres result in a genre score of 1 or 0 or anything in between. And 2. Scoring the movies, running the model to see which movies are the most Oscar baity. It's generally best practice to use different datasets for each step. To initialize the model, a dataset featuring all movies that have ever been nominated for Best Picture was used. To determine which movies were to be scored, I went on IMDb and found good movies, as well as popular movies. Movies which fit both of these criteria are then to be scored. So don't blame me if your favourite movie isn't on the list. Blame your taste in movies. So what does all of this mean? Let's take a look at an example with genre. To initialize the model, firstly, a set of groups are defined. In this case, genres. Secondly, movies are assigned to each of these groups. In this case, the same movie can be assigned to multiple groups. Thirdly, the winners of Best Picture are identified. For each group, an overall score is calculated by simply dividing the number of winners by the total number of nominees within each group, i.e., the historical win rate. However, this implementation has one significant drawback: bias caused by differences in sample size. What does that mean? Imagine this: achieving a 20% win rate is much easier with only 5 movies than with 100. How do we get around this? Well, the following is done. The global average win rate is calculated. On average, how likely is a nominated movie to win, regardless of genre? An adjusted genre score is then calculated using this complicated formula, which basically accounts for historical win rate whilst minimizing bias due to small sample size using the global average win rate. So, using this formula, the scores for each genre are calculated, and then scaled between 0 and 1, where 1 is the most Oscar baity group, and 0 is the least Oscar baity group, allowing comparison between factors. That's it! The model is now initialized, and now we can score the movies. The movie's genre score is calculated using a simple average. For example, Rain Man and Crash are given a genre score of 1, as they only appear in the drama category, whereas Little Miss Sunshine a score of 0.75, as it appears in both drama and comedy. So, now we have a general approach to calculate the genre score for each movie. Define categories, assign movies to each category, calculate the category score using the complicated formula, and lastly, calculate the score for each movie. The same approach is applied to keywords, runtime, and budget, with a small modification for the latter two. For genre and keywords, the categories are, to a certain extent, already defined. With reference to Green Book, this is because the categories are qualitative by nature. However, for runtime and budget, the categories are numerical in nature. This means that there is some level of control as to how groups can be defined. For example, for runtime, we could do the following: grouping movies with runtimes between 1 and 2 hours, and 2 and 3 hours. However, if we were to determine the number of movies in each runtime category, we may get something like the following. Here, we see that there is a significant disparity in the number of movies between categories. For example, there are many more movies lasting between 1 and 2 hours than there are between 2 and 3 hours. As discussed earlier, this can introduce unwanted bias. So, what can we do? Well, define the categories in such a way that this disparity is minimized. For example, in the following way. Here, we see that the 1 to 2 hour runtime category has been split into 2 different categories. This results in an equal distribution of movies amongst the runtime categories, minimizing the unwanted bias. So far, for each factor, we've used the historic win rate to determine a category's score. However, for month of release, although the methodology is identical otherwise, this differs. Here, the historic nomination rate is used instead, as this provides a better fit. What percentage of nominated movies were released in a certain month? For example, here the pre-scaled score for December would be 0.4. Finally, for cast and crew, I created my own scoring system, based on the number of Oscar wins and nominations held at the time of a film's release. The system is as follows. Points are awarded for each actor/director who previously won or was nominated for an Oscar. Bonus points are awarded if any actor/director had previously won more than one Oscar or been nominated for 5 or more Oscars that they didn't end up winning. Now, there are many ways to create a model like this, each of them with their own pros and cons. For example, the cons of my model include missing factors. For example, movies featuring actors who undergo significant physical transformations are often seen as Oscar bait, as well as the model's static nature. Shifts in voting behaviour over time aren't factored in. What was Oscar bait in 1980 may not be Oscar bait now. Despite these limitations, the model performs pretty well, as we'll see. So, what does all of this tell us? What are the keys to winning Best Picture? Number 1. Make a war or history movie. War romances or dramas do especially well. Whatever you do, don't make a sci-fi or mystery movie. Everything Everywhere All at Once was a massive outlier. Number 2. Make a movie focusing on one of the following: history and politics, mental health, social issues, or violence and crime. Some other strong performing keywords include black and white, as well as Broadway. Number 3. Release your movie at the end of the year. Of those nominated for Best Picture, 49% were released in the last 3 months of the year, with 25% alone in December. Number 4. Make a long movie. Ideally, anything above 160 minutes. Movies less than 100 minutes have a very low success rate. Number 5. Make a low budget movie. Somewhere between $20 and $29 million. High budget movies rarely do well. Now that we know the characteristics of movies that tend to win Best Picture, let's apply that knowledge and see which movies, according to our model, had the best chance of winning Best Picture, or, in other words, were the most Oscar baity. Shown here are the 5 most Oscar baity movies of 2018, and we can see that Green Book actually tops the list. In fact, 3 of the top 5 were nominated for Best Picture. So why does the model rank these movies so highly? Well, the genre score, which the model assumes is the most important factor besides keywords, is strong for most of these movies. That's because these movies are histories as well as dramas, both of which rank highly as Oscar baity genres. Vice and The Mule have slightly lower genre scores because they aren't histories, at least primarily, and have elements of comedy and crime within them, which aren't as Oscar baity. However, these 2 movies make up ground as they were released in December, the most Oscar baity month of the year, as well as having a super strong cast and crew, with 4 of the lead actors as well as the director having won or been nominated for an Oscar compared to 2 for the other 3 movies. As already discussed, besides genre, keywords is the other most important factor in the model. Unsurprisingly, we can see that the top rated movies share some common themes such as history, politics, LGBT issues, and the USA. All of which rank favourably in terms of Oscar baitiness. Now, let's look at where my favourite movie of 2018, Mission Impossible Fallout, ranks. As we can see, it sits 17th, in the middle of the pack. Although it has a good genre and keywords score, the scores for month of release, cast and crew, and budget reduce its Oscar baitiness significantly. Summer blockbusters rarely do well at the Oscars, especially one with only one actor who was previously recognised by the Academy. Looking at the least Oscar baiting movies of 2018, we see that there is actually one which was nominated for Best Picture. Now, although I don't believe that Black Panther is an Oscar baiting movie, like Mission Impossible, it's an action-adventure blockbuster with an even less Oscar baiting release month, it's probably ranked lower than it should be. As discussed earlier, shifts in voting behaviour over time aren't factored into the model. Black Panther's low score highlights this, as its nomination reflects the Academy's growing recognition of diverse storytelling and societal shifts. As for other movies in the top 5, it's easy to see why they are there. Genre scores are mediocre to poor. Comedies, sci-fis, thrillers, horrors, and mysteries generally don't do well at the Oscars. Month of release scores are poor. The movies were released too early. Cast and crew scores are poor. 2 of the movies have no actors who were previously recognised by the Academy, and of the movies that do have one, they only have one. Lastly, the budget score is also poor, either too low or too high. Next, let's look at the most Oscar baiting movies of all time. According to my model, Lawrence of Arabia takes the crown, followed closely by The Deer Hunter and Schindler's List. 4 of the top 5 actually won Best Picture, which is unsurprising since the model scores factors based on the historical win rate. So, instead, let's take a look at which movies failed to win Best Picture, despite being super Oscar baity. This time, the thin red line takes the crown. In this case, 3 of the top 5 were nominated for Best Picture, representing some level of success. How about the biggest surprises? Which movies, despite being super Oscar baity, weren't even nominated for Best Picture? This time, Doubt takes the prize, followed by Casino and Scarface. Now, we've come to the bit you've all been waiting for. Who is going to win the 2025 Best Picture Award? According to my model, of course. And so, with an Oscar bait score of 0.61, the Oscar goes to The Brutalist. It ticks all of the key boxes. A drama set in the United States that explores historical themes such as the effect of war on individuals and social issues like drug addiction. Released in December, with 2 cast members who have been previously recognised by the Academy, with a runtime exceeding 3.5 hours, and made on a modest budget, although slightly too low to be super Oscar baity. The Brutalist holds a fairly strong lead over Nickel Boys, which sits as the second most Oscar baity movie of those nominated. Nickel Boys does pretty well in most categories. However, its lack of Oscar recognised actor or director, as well as its shorter runtime, let it down. Wicked, Conclave and Emilia Perez round out the top 5. A lot has been said about Emilia Perez, but as you can see, my model doesn't believe it's super Oscar baity. Although, this may be another case of the model not recognising shifts in voting behaviour, as the Academy has increasingly embraced stories that amplify underrepresented voices, including those of the transgender community. So there we have it. I'm predicting The Brutalist to win the 2025 Oscar for Best Picture, What do you think? Do you agree? Or do you have another favourite in mind? Let me know in the comments. If you've gotten this far, I just want to say thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more, please don't forget to like and subscribe. There will definitely be more videos like this coming soon. Thank you.